Did the old year leave you with a few extra pounds and your New Year's resolution is to get back into shape? Hello YouTubers and preppers, welcome to the channel. I'm Evita, Cooks and Preps. If you're new, welcome to the family. Fermented foods are part of our daily diets, and I'm kicking off the new year with new batches of our favorites, starting with, you guessed it, sauerkraut. Sauerkraut is very easy to make, and the classic sauerkraut is usually made using just cabbage, typically green cabbage. You could use red cabbage as well, and salt, and that's about it. And today I will share my recipe. To make the sauerkraut, we're going to need obviously a vessel. You can use a glass jar with an airlock like this one. I'm going to be using this fermentator that I picked up a few years ago, and I'm very happy with it, and it works wonderful. But if you don't have a fermentator or a crock like this one, like I said, you could use one of these jars with an airlock. You can even use a half-gallon jar or the quart-size jar, depending on how much you're gonna make, and a cloth over the top. The only difference is that when you use one of these vessels with an airlock or a fermentator or crock like this one, the process is a little bit easier. In addition to the cabbage, I'm going to be using some whole peppercorn to make the sauerkraut. And because I like the German style sauerkraut, I'm going to be using some caraway seeds. And you guys know by now that we like it with a little bit of a kick. And my husband loves his sauerkraut with some red chili flakes, so I'll be adding some of those. And of course, we're going to need salt. And you guys know by now that my salt of choice is Redmond real salt. In the jars, I have two types of salt. You could use the refined salt, or you could use the coarse salt, depending on how much time you have available. When you use the coarse salt, the only problem is that since we have to massage the cabbage with the salt, it may take a little bit longer. But just keep in mind that because Redmond real salt is loaded with over 60 trace minerals, some of those minerals will not dissolve, particularly silica. So keep that in mind, because you're definitely going to end up with some visible particles of the Redmond real salt at the bottom of your jars. Let me remind you that as an affiliate for Redmond real salt, anytime you use my link, you can take advantage of a 15% off coupon code, and at the same time help the channel, because I do make a small commission from Redmond real salt anytime you use my link. So check it out, and for your convenience, I'll leave the link right up here. While I prep the cabbage, I'm going to be making a brine, because when you make sauerkraut, one of the key components is obviously the brine. Even though we're going to be massaging the cabbage with the salt, and it's going to help to extract its natural water, sometimes it turns out that we don't have enough brine. You always end up having to top it with a brine. So I'm going to get a head start and make a brine, and I have some water, and to the water I'm going to be adding the Redmond real salt. And just whisk it to dissolve the salt. Like I said, some of the minerals in Redmond real salt might not dissolve, and that's perfectly okay, because you want to keep all the benefits of the minerals that come with your Redmond real salt, which is the reason why I made the switch to Redmond real salt. In just a couple of minutes, the water has already come to a boil, which is one of the reasons why this stovetop is my favorite. I'm going to set this aside while I prepare the cabbage. And look at this, you see that on the bottom? That's exactly what I was talking about, all those minerals in the Redmond real salt, but that's to be expected. I'm not going to discard it. I'm going to leave it just the way it is, because I will be using all of it. Sauerkraut is very popular with street vendors and stadiums as a favorite topping for hot dogs. Who doesn't love a good hot dog once in a while, right? Don't worry, I'm not going to bore you with doing all the cabbages, but all these little bits and pieces are going to be going into our compost. And you also want to remove any pieces of cabbage that don't look so great, like this one. And I'm going to just set these aside for the compost or to make vegetable soup later on. You could use a food processor to speed up this process. I like to do this manually instead, but that's entirely up to you. Besides being a tasty condiment, sauerkraut, like many fermented foods, are loaded with fantastic probiotics that are beneficial to your diet. And it's been said that the consumption of fermented foods throughout the day can keep the doctor away. Pickling cabbage is a very ancient practice that dates back many centuries, and in some cultures, because they did not have access to refrigeration, they used to bury it in clay pots to keep it nice and cool. Lately, I've been going back in time and trying to put some of those things into practice. I believe we really need to go back to how our ancestors used to do things. I think they had it all figured out, and in the modern days, we kind of complicated everything. Sometimes I like to challenge myself to try to do things the way they used to, just to see what it felt like. Coming from an island, sometimes we did without power or water for that matter. And to me, it wasn't a big deal. I've been around people that tell me all the time that they couldn't deal without water and power for more than a day. I can tell you that it's not so bad after all. You just have to figure out the way of surviving the times. But honestly, I wish I had spent more time with my grandparents just so that I can learn more from them. Some of the health benefits of eating sauerkraut range from improvement of digestion due to its higher content of fiber, which is a nutrient known for aiding the symptoms of constipation and diarrhea because the fiber absorbs the excess water, therefore solidifying the stool. And of course, the probiotics that form during the fermentation process will improve your overall gut health. Obesity affects many Americans, which is associated with type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and the digestive system. And due to its low caloric content and high fiber content, it helps to keep us satiated longer, therefore eat less food. And most importantly, the probiotics in sauerkraut decreases the fat absorption, therefore helping us to lose weight. Some of the vitamins found in sauerkraut are vitamin C, vitamin K1, iron, folate, manganese, copper, and potassium, to name a few. So if you have not considered incorporating more fermented foods to your diet, this is probably one of the best ways to start. We have to rinse it, and the way I like to rinse my cabbage and just about all my vegetables is I do it more than once, and I use a solution of water and a little bit of baking soda with a few drops of vinegar. I'm gonna do that in the other side of the kitchen, and I'll come back for the next step once I have the cabbage nice and clean. So this is our clean cabbage that has been rinsed 3 times. It is a lot of cabbage, or it seems like a lot of cabbage, but once the cabbage has been macerated with the salt, it's going to reduce quite a bit in volume. Because it's a lot of cabbage, I'm going to be working in small batches. And let's start adding the first tray of cabbage. Okay, now it's important that you use the right proportion or percentage of salt. I'm using 6 tablespoons of salt for 10 pounds of cabbage. The next thing we're gonna do is massage the salt and squeeze the cabbage a little bit. That's gonna help release some of its natural water and its juices, which is one of the ingredients or the key components to the fermented cabbage or sauerkraut. Immediately after you add the salt, you start feeling the difference. Okay, in between, I'm also going to be adding the peppercorn, the red chili flakes, and the caraway seeds if you're going to use them. But if you want to make just a simple sauerkraut, you just add the salt, which is basically all you need. It's already reduced in volume quite a bit. as you can see, it starts to decrease in volume right before your eyes. Okay, let's get a few more of those peppercorns in there. Caraway seeds. And my husband's red chili flakes. I love that sound. Notice how the cabbage has shrunk quite a bit, and if you look closely, there's quite a bit of water in the bottom of the bucket. So it is doing its thing, and in about an hour or so, I'm gonna start packing it into the crock pots. Okay, it's been a little bit less than an hour, but I have another fermentation project that I'm working with, and I'm a little bit pressed for time. So I'm gonna start packing the crock pot or the fermentator with the cabbage, which, by the way, it has released quite a bit of its natural juices, and it's formed its own brine. And compress it the best way you can, because you want to get as much of the cabbage in here as possible, and you also need the cabbage to remain submerged in its own brine. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start adding the brine. In this case, this is the natural brine that formed from the cabbage. And what we need is enough brine to keep the cabbage submerged underwater. That is very important. So I'm going to be adding a little bit more of the cabbage because I think I have room. And then I'm going to top it with the brine that I made earlier. Okay. You definitely don't want to add too much brine either, because this still has a ways to go. For the sake of time, I want to show you to what level I want to get the brine. So, and the brine is already cold. That's why I made it earlier, just to make sure that it was nice and cold. Now, the benefit of using this crock or vessel is that it comes with its own built-in airlock, which is this raised lip on the top, and also includes this little glass plate that it's going to cover it. But before we cover it, we have to add some water. In order to properly ferment the sauerkraut, you need to allow oxygen to penetrate the content of the vessel. And to do that, we're going to be using this glass plate that is included with the crock, laid over the top. It's going to allow oxygen to come into the vessel, and it's also going to allow the gases inside of the crock to escape, which is part of the fermentation process. Now I'm going to set this aside and allow it to ferment in the warmest area in my kitchen. Usually I like to keep it on top of my counter for the first week or so, just so that I can monitor it. Your target temperature should be between 70 and 75 degrees, give or take a few degrees. I'm not very picky about that. Like I said, I usually just monitor it, and once the process is over, you can keep it at room temperature or refrigerate it, but I guarantee you that in my house, that's not going to be a problem, because usually after 2 weeks we start eating the cabbage. But ideally, you want to keep it anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks if you're patient enough to wait that long. For more fermentation projects, consider subscribing to the channel, like, share, and comment for the YouTube algorithms, and activate the bell to be notified when I upload new videos. Until next time, I'm Evita, Cooks and Preps. Bon appetit! You really have to try it.